Want to make sure. All right, great. Well, good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Kate Cahill. I'm a senior psychometrician with PSI Services, and I'm also a member of the CNG program committee. We're excited that you're here to join us for today's virtual meeting. As participants continue to log on, I would like to go ahead and mention a few housekeeping items before we get started with the program. Everyone was muted upon entry, but you are able to mute and unmute yourself, but please keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. Our panelists will be using video. You may choose to use video or not. You can flip it on or off as it suits you. As you have questions, I would ask that you submit questions or comments through that chat feature. We do have someone monitoring the chat, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A with our speakers. And so we welcome you to share your thoughts and insights as we go along. We will also have time at the end for any announcements, job openings, events, anything you would like to share. So please put that information in the chat as well, so we can be sure that you have time to speak at the end of the program. Also, as you already saw, we are recording the session and it will be available to anyone who is not able to join us today. And finally, shortly after today's session, sorry, just one second. Just realized my slide hadn't advanced. After today's session, you will receive a survey where you'll be able to share your thoughts on today's program, as well as any suggestions for future programming. So please make sure to complete that survey once you receive it. Okay. CNG would also like to thank our sponsors for this year. The organizations you see listed are ongoing sponsors of CNG, and we certainly want to thank them for their support. They make these sessions free and available to our membership. So a big thank you to BTLS Surpass, Certiverse, Examity, Lineup, Measure Learning, PSI, Pearson VUE, and Prometric for their continued support of CNG. Also, I want to thank our supporting sponsors. We appreciate these organizations that participate in CNG and also support us financially and help us make it possible for us to provide these sessions. So thank you, the American Association of Medical Assistants, ASIS International, Board of Certified Safety Professionals, CMAA, HUMRO, and SHRM. Today, we do have two showcase sponsors, and those sponsors are Pearson VUE and Examity. We also have a representative from each of these organizations who will introduce themselves and take a few moments to introduce their organizations. Eric, if you'd like to unmute yourself, I'll turn it over to you so you can tell us about Pearson VUE.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, let's see if I can wait. I'm going to wait till you unshare. And then I can share my screen, Tommy. So before I share, just a moment to say thank you and hello to everyone. We're happy to sponsor CNG, and we were just in the breakout room talking about wanting to get back together in person for a meeting, just not back in the office. But let me go ahead and share my screen and take advantage of the opportunity to speak with you now. There we go. You guys tell me if I'm sharing the correct screen here. All right. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And let me just see if I can. There we go. So for those of you who may know me through my LinkedIn photo, this is how I actually look. I do need to update that to get it into the correct decade. My name's Eric DeStalfo, and I'm Vice President of Business Development for Pearson VUE. Very brief introduction about me. I started out wanting to be a professor of English literature, which did not work out, and I think that was a blessing. And instead, I went into the testing industry for the past 27 years, which is shocking to say that, but half of that time has been with Pearson VUE. And I work in our business development team, in our professional and federal and regulatory markets, serving our clients and also pursuing new partnerships. And as those of you who might remember Cy Sperling, I'm not only the vice president, but I'm also a client. I used to be a client of Pearson VUE many years ago, so I did know them as a client as well as a customer. So This is the ads. I think someday there'll be a skip ad button, but this is the non-ad supported version of CNG. So I appreciate the time to tell you a little bit about us, but I want to keep it brief and also just make some observations that might be of interest to this group because you're all testing folks. So I'm going to show some numbers here. Pearson VUE, we're a full service provider. We do everything from test development through psychometric services, through exam delivery and results and reporting. And that's a lot of exams we deliver, right? 16 million a year at over 5,000 centers. But really, I don't think our size is the interesting part of us. It's really what the 16 million exams across hundreds of clients in medical, IT, federal hiring and promotion assessments, and regulatory, what kind of perspective that gives us. Because I think the scale at which we operate gives us a chance, we hope, to be useful and valuable to our clients, to give them a perspective on where their program stands in the continuum of what their needs could be. So it's really not, just that we deliver lots of exams. It's for whom and how and what are all the decisions that lead to that. We deliver millions of exams in locations like this, our company owned and operated centers, which are virtually identical because they're designed to the same patent. So everything down to the hardware and the size of the carrels and the color of the carpet, which is not very inspiring from a decorating point of view, but it's nice and standard for psychometricians to feel reassured about. We deliver millions of exams in these centers, which are represent the maximum amount of control we can have over a site. All the employees are ours, the leases are ours, the equipment's ours. And now we deliver millions of exams in these kinds of environments where it's as different as every candidate's living room or workspace or kitchen. And that brings other challenges and opportunities for candidate access. So, this slide is about 15 years old, but I find that it's become more and more relevant even with all the disruptive changes we've had since COVID 2.5 years ago. More than ever, there's a tension and a choice between how much access and convenience do you want to extend to your candidates versus how much control and consistency and security do you need. And these days, candidates want more and more access and more convenience and more frictionless experience. So the tension between these two, it's a healthy tension, but it is definitely there, is, I think, more relevant than ever. And we're finding some programs much favor access and others are still on the side of more control and consistency and focus on security. And again, since we are testing geeks among us, and I say that term really affectionately because I consider myself very much a testing geek, I thought I would share some numbers, although there'll be no quiz later, because I thought this might be interesting to some people who are observers of the industry. So we serve over 475 clients across all the verticals, right? Medical, IT, financial, all kinds of professional. And since that fateful month of March 2020, since the pandemic began and caused disruption to test centers and so many other things, just under half, a little over 200 have activated remote online proctoring for their program, at least partially. And I think it's interesting to see, when you look back on 2021, that of the 16 million exams we delivered, 18% of those were remote online proctored. And I find that number simultaneously both large and small, because we went from barely 20,000 tests a month online before the pandemic to closer to 300,000, somewhere between 250,000 to 300,000 per month, which is staggering. But there's still an interesting complementary quality to how much, I think the average observer might say, wow, 18%, that's not as many as I might have thought. It's still a large number. And among the programs that offer both, a typical range is that still 60 to 80% of candidates who have a multimodal option choose test centers over online proctoring. But on the other side, on the IT side, it's actually kind of reversed, closer to 70, even 80% or more could be, choose online proctoring versus brick and mortar. So what it comes down to is that really every program has different needs, different security profiles, different candidate population, and it breaks out in as many, the psychometric answer of it depends actually applies a lot to modalities, what kind of program you have, what sort of candidate needs do you have. And this is only a snapshot in time, right? Who knows what 2023, 2024 will bring. But we see that more modalities mean more security challenges and more need to get creative about how you respond to those threats or how you detect them. And I think the good news for our industry, which has been incredibly resilient, and I say that across all our colleagues and our competitors, our colleagues, our sponsors, is that we've been resilient through COVID and all the challenges, and that the demand for both in-person test center testing and remote online proctoring, we see it continuing to rise and to be complementary on both. We're pretty much recovered in brick and mortar testing back to what we saw in 2019 and growing, and online proctoring is just endlessly, of interest to existing clients, to new clients. So the last thing I want to talk about is another part of our business that has changed so much in the last 2 years. We always focused on exam security and how to detect threats and how to respond. But I would say the last 2.5 years has been a quantum leap forward, where we've had to develop a different model of how to, well, first of all, how to detect threats with new approaches to data forensics. Other colleagues in the industry out there, like at Cavion, have been doing this for years. Now we need to, I think, even look at it in a deeper way about how to detect collusion and exam fraud. But we sort of have stepped up with our enforcement model, kind of borrowing a page from law enforcement. We have a couple of former FBI, believe it or not, counterterrorism folks who are now on our security team. They're happy not to be working on such, deadly things as what they did before, but on exam fraud, which is still pretty bad. And it turns out that in the world of exam misconduct, there are ways to link it to legal enforcement so that you can pursue candidates more than just revoking their certifications or banning them from testing. If you are attempting proxy testing, through another device, that qualifies as wire fraud. That is a very serious crime. If you're harvesting content, that can be, proven you've stolen intellectual property, and there's a lot of legal protections against that. If you cheat on an exam and that fraudulent activity allows you to earn money or get money inappropriately, that could be linked to a racketeering charge. Many of us remember back in 2012 or 2013, when the public school teachers were pretty harshly sentenced to, in Atlanta, it happened to be in Atlanta on the Georgia test under the No Child Left Behind framework, that by erasing incorrect answers and putting correct answers, I think inadvertently they were increasing their teacher bonuses, which qualified as defrauding the federal government, and they went to prison for 6 years. So that's pretty harsh, but it's a reminder that there are ways to get at bad actors if you can link the evidence and link it to a crime. And we've been, on behalf of our customers who face a lot more security risks now with the multiplication of modalities, these are among the services that we're adding to what we've done. And with that, I'm going to thank you. I stayed under my 9.5 minutes or 10 minutes of sponsorship, but we're really grateful for the opportunity to sponsor CNG, especially with the great topic that we're putting on today. And with that, I will hand it off to, I believe, Thierry for this Examity sponsorship.
Yep, Thierry, if you want to unmute yourself, you can tell us, turn it on and tell us all about Examity. And also thank you, Eric and Pearson VUE, for your guys' support.
You guys are so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, well, hello, everyone. My name is Thierry Berthoud, and I'm Director of Business Development at Examity, focusing on the professional certification market. I've been working in the computer-based testing industry for almost 20 years now, in a variety of roles, here in the US more recently, but previously in the UK. In fact, I used to work for CNG back in the UK. So what can I tell you about Examity? Well, we're a world leader in online and remote proctoring, one of the fastest growing edtech companies in the United States. We were founded in 2013, so almost 10 years ago, with a purpose to serve colleges, universities, employers, and assessment providers. So since 2013, the market for online remote proctoring has only increased, and today we maintain 5 global locations. We support hundreds of clients, and we proctor millions of exams each year. So Examity is a CNG sponsor, so I have kindly been invited here today to deliver a few words to frame today's session on Credential As You Go. And I did some research before the session, and having read about Credential As You Go, this is the image that comes to my mind. These Legos here. The concept that learning is modular, it's incremental, it's stackable, and also the fact that there is no age limit to learning. For me, it's a lifelong endeavor. It's probably one of the most powerful things someone can do to achieve social mobility. It's something we do, or at least something we ought to do throughout our lives. But it's also contingent on access and getting recognition for it. So where does Examity fit into all this? Well, with Examity, a growing number of candidates can access and complete their exam when and where it's most convenient for them, from the comfort of their home or their office, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's no waiting around. With us, you're connected with the proctor in less than a minute, and there's no passing around either. With Examity, the way we operate, the same person authenticates you, proctors your exam session, and provides support if you need it during the session. And with an average of just 2 candidates per proctor, our proctors can truly focus on quality proctoring and providing a more personal human touch, which is very important, especially when you go remote. Of course, preserving the confidentiality of your candidates' personal identifiable information and the integrity of your intellectual property is top of our list of priorities too, which is why we are SOC 2 accredited, and we're trusted to deliver 3.5 million tests a year with 500 plus clients across 50 plus countries around the world. So that's really an overview of Examity and what we deliver. So I just want to finish by saying thank you for being here, and I will now hand over to our panel of distinguished hosts. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Thierry. I'm going to start sharing again. Okay. Okay. So let's get started with our topic for today, the Credentialing As You Go initiative. As you can see, the session overview on the screen, CAYG is an initiative with 21 universities and a recent $3 million grant from the United States Department of Education, Institute for Educational Sciences, that envisages an incremental credentialing ecosystem in which all learners are recognized for what they know and can do as they acquire learning from multiple sources. Leaders from the CAYG initiative and from WorkCred will present information on this important initiative and how organizations can get involved to create pathways and greater access to their credentials. We have assembled a wonderful team of panelists for our session today, and I'm very excited for you all to hear from them. So first, I'm going to introduce Holly Zanville, who is a research professor and co-director of the Program of Skills, Credentialing, and Workforce Policy at George Washington University. We also have Nancy Travers, who is the director of the Center for Leadership and Credentialing Learning at SUNY Empire State College. And also Karen Elzy is the Associate Executive Director at WorkCred. And as well, we have Bill West, is a 25-year veteran of the assessment industry and member of the CNG board. I am now going to hand this over to Bill to begin the presentation. But we are honored to have these panelists here with us today.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everyone. Jump in. The time we have, we're going to be talking fast, but don't worry, we're going to be posting a lot of information after this as well. And I want to start out by thanking CNG for letting us come before this great group with this initiative. I personally, as it said, 25 plus years, it's somewhere north of that. I've worked with many dozens of credentialing programs. I was part of a credentialing program. And one of the common things I hear from many of the people on this call today is one thing people want to do is how do I go reach down, I don't know if down's the right way to say it, into the academic experience, right? Into academia to start a relationship to support future certificates sooner and help them in their academic careers and begin a lifelong relationship. And this initiative, I think, is a great way to do that. I think it's really important for our industry to get our heads around, because not only can your credentialing organization reach students, future candidates sooner, but it's a great way to support them. As you'll hear from our panelists, this is an excellent way to help people grow and have achievements along the way toward their professional credential. So as we go, I'm going to be monitoring the chat. We're trying to save a little space for an open discussion at the end. Don't know if that'll happen. I'll pop in with a few of the questions, but please post your questions. I'll be putting those in front of the panelists as we go or at the end. And any we don't get to, or even those we do, we're going to be posting afterwards. This agenda is going to be, if you want to, we'll start out with really what this is, elaborating on the last screen, kind of what's been happening so far, really a glimpse into where this is going. We're going to hear a little bit from WorkCred on how they're involved, and then kind of why this matters, how you can get involved. So we'll be doing that. And with, if you want to advance the slide, I am going to kick it over to Nan, one of the leaders in this space, to give you a little bit more information on what this is. Nan, take it away.
Thank you so much, Bill. And I also want to thank Terry for doing a quick little introduction there too. That was great that you tied this work in there. I'm Nan Travers. I want to just start off with just a little bit of a background and then kind of explain what we're doing right now. And so this work started under a Lumina Foundation grant. We were very concerned at that time. It was around 36 million. We're now up to almost 40 million adults in this country that have some college and no degree. When we start to look at the reasons why, many of the times it has to do with the length of the degree, or that it's not able to help people get right into work. And so we were really trying to say, okay, how do we start to recognize that work as people are acquiring their knowledge? That number of the current 40 million relates to about 1 in 6 adults in this country that have some college and no degree. So we really have to be rethinking how we're doing the credentialing system in higher education, but then how does this also connect to industry certifications, and how does everything come together? Because we're really talking about the learner across his or her lifetime, and thinking about how can we get better at being able to identify and validate and be able to acknowledge the kinds of knowledge and skills that people have. If we could go to the next slide. So during this Lumina grant, what we ended up doing was we sort of examined the trends across the United States in terms of what was happening around credentialing. And we came up with a framework that's gone through some prototyping and a lot of feedback on it, and one that we're working on right now. And so the framework has these 6 different kind of trends or approaches in terms of what we're seeing out there, and really trying to help people think about how to be even more purposeful in this way. A lot of people say right now that the credentialing field is kind of a wild, wild west. Everybody's creating all over the place, and it's becoming more and more confusing. So as a result, we really were trying to be able to kind of capture what we're trying to do. So the framework in these 6 approaches, I'm not going to go in depth in this. It's on our website. We can also share it in more depth in other ways. But basically what we're trying to do is look at ways that credentialing can capture people's skills when they're reskilling, upskilling, creating specializations, how everything fits together, and not just in terms of higher ed or just in industry, but really how does it all fit together across that, and thinking about how does it integrate, how do these credentials get developed to really think about how they transfer to the next level. And so the idea of transfer is built into the design. Thinking about how industry learning can really be part of higher education, and higher education being part of industry learning. And we have a lot of different examples of how partnerships are really building this out. And then also thinking about how can we credential learning that has already occurred, and people are out there with knowledge and skills, but not being recognized. And so sort of thinking of that auto award as we go along. So we're currently working with a grant through the Institute for Educational Sciences out of the U.S. Department of Education. We also have a Walmart grant that is going to support a lot more of the building of the resources. We're currently working in 3 states, and I'll talk about that a little bit in just a few minutes. And then looking at how to expand from there. So I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Holly Zanville, who's going to take the next slide. Oh, that is my slide. I'm so sorry, Holly. So just very quickly, what we mean by incremental credentials, and Terry kind of mentioned this whole idea of being able to capture learning all along that learning pathway, and how that connects to the context of world of work and education. The reason we picked a word like incremental credentials right now is because it's very descriptive, but it really is encompassing all different types of credentials. We were finding people are getting very confused by all the nomenclature out there, and we're actually doing some work in our around the names and the language that people are using in the credentialing space. But this idea that, we really need to move more to recognizing in smaller increments and having them fit together so that it's very clear what somebody knows and what they can do all along the pathway. So now I'm going to turn it over to Holly for the next slide.
Hi, everyone, and I'm Holly, and it's so great to be with you today. So I'm going to talk about some drivers of change, and then I'm going to talk about a big umbrella that I'd like to share with you. So there are 4 basic drivers of pretty major change in our system. And although we talk about Credential As You Go as an initiative, it's really a movement. We're trying to really move the current degree-centric system into an incremental credentialing system. And there are kind of 4 main reasons for this. And the first one is because of our degree-centric system. As you all know, we have pretty much a 4-degree system of associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. But it's a pretty dated system because there are an array of credentials that matter and have value that sit outside the degree. And we all know how long these degrees take to earn, especially for adults who need to focus on work, family, and many other obligations. But our system does not recognize partial degrees. And often people without a degree are treated as though they have no knowledge, and that hinders their employment and further education. And those without a degree are have been acquiring knowledge and skills, we actually think, and that potentially could have been counted toward shorter credentials if we had a system that did that. But we don't have a system that does that. So that's a problem, and that's one of the things we're hoping to transform to. A second driver of change is equity, the lack of fairness in our current system. The census data informs us that about 52% of adults in the US have no college credential. And there is that 39 million that Nan pointed out who have some college but no credential. And we have got to do something about that huge number, and the number's growing. It was 36 million just a few years back. Now we're up to nearly 40 million. And the issue particularly is that there's a very clear differential between students of color and their access to completing credentials in higher ed compared to white students. And the largest proportion of those in that some college and no degree group are Black adults who also are carrying the highest debt load. So that we have got to address the equity concerns as part of the movement of Credential As You Go. The third big driver, frankly, and what Nan already mentioned, is credential expansion. The credential landscape in the US is really confusing and chaotic. There are close to 1 million. Actually, the number, according to Credential Engine, is 967,734 unique credentials. That's a lot, and people don't really understand that world very well at all. And furthermore, there's 4 different types of providers. It's not just higher education institutions anymore. There are the post-secondary institutions, there are the MOOC, the online providers, there are the non-academic providers, and there are secondary schools. And the interesting in the last 5 years, the demand for new types of credentials, especially since the start of the pandemic, has really been growing substantially, driven in part by growing demand for certificate programs, for industry certifications, which obviously is your world, and other types of alternative credential offerings. And I'll just pick on the open badges for a moment to give you a sense of the largesse of these changes. The number of open badges awarded nearly doubled from 24 million in 2018 to 43 million in 2020. That's tremendous growth among the badging group of credentials. And interesting to many of us, as the acceptance of these new types of credentials has grown, a number of employers, big employers, have become learning providers in their own right. They're moving beyond training their own employees or providing tuition assistance to send their staff to higher ed to upskill, but they're also developing their own curricula, and they're expanding their public-facing credential offerings to the public, and their credentialing. And that's a world that we all don't know that much about, but this is something that we all need to understand more as employers themselves have stepped into the credentialing world. So, and I would say that the last key driver for change is really workforce, the workforce ourselves, the 21st century workforce. Our workforce is different than it was 40 years ago. Employers, of course, still need workers with industry-specific knowledge and skills, but increasingly they're valuing 21st century skills, which are called human skills or power skills or soft skills, and whatever the word we call it, this has become much more valuable. And many of the employers are struggling to find workers that have the knowledge and skills that they need, and that's not that well documented or credentialed. And some workers are finding that their knowledge and skills are really not up to date, and they may actually even be obsolete. So clearly the skills dilemma, what skills are needed by which industry sectors and what job levels and who provides them, is really getting to be important. So all these 4 in this big circle, main drivers for the movement that we're talking about today. So next slide. Now we're going to the umbrella. And we have a big umbrella because there's so much work that is involved in this movement. And there's actually 8 big bodies of work under the umbrella. And the first is rapid prototyping of the incremental credential framework that Nan just presented to you in 3 states that we're working with. And she's going to share with you a map and talk a little bit more about that. The second big body of work under the umbrella is building awareness of just what this is all about, and that's through a national campaign. The third is really on research. Can we take that framework, and if through rapid prototyping we develop a number of new incremental credentials, Will that make a difference? Will we have a fairer system? Will we have better student outcomes? A lot of folks around the country are wanting evidence. And one of the things we're doing in the Credential As You Go approach is to develop a strong research base which can inform next steps. The fourth is we're also providing training and technical assistance to help institutions and employers in designing and implementing this array of incremental credentials. Fifth, we're making sure that we create a more equitable and inclusive system. This is just imperative to build a fairer credentialing system in the US. A major area is around policy change to support incremental credentialing. A lot of this is state policy, but it's institutions, Board of Regents, and it's federal policy as well. And that's another big area under the umbrella. We also have to think through how to build trust in the quality of the incremental credentials. If we don't have quality credentials, we might as well not bother to develop them, because it's not going to help individuals to do well in the workforce world. And last, although it shouldn't probably be last on the list, we're working to connect the many related innovation initiatives that are underway in the learn and work ecosystem to leverage resources and accomplish real change. And in the 3 states we're working with, we've identified in each, there's something like 20 to 28 other pretty major initiatives going on, which suggests the true challenge in trying to coordinate and leverage resources among them. So I will turn it back to Nan now.
Thank you so much, Holly. And as Holly mentioned, and I mentioned, I think earlier, right now we're working in 3 states. We have 21 institutions that are involved in the prototyping of the framework and developing different kinds of incremental credentialing and thinking about it as a whole credentialing process. So some of them really are taking it from the non-credit to the credit and embedding the industry certifications in that as well. On our map, the green represents community colleges and the black is representing either comprehensive colleges or universities. And so we're trying to really work with a whole array of institutions. Some of them are small, some of them are large, but trying to get a sense of the different kinds of complexities it is for really changing their credentialing system and really connecting it to the larger credentialing system out there. Next slide. And so on this slide, we are listing out some of the industry field areas that these 21 institutions are working on, and there are more. These are just some of the top ones. We have quite a few different ones that are working. One, for example, is working on credentialing in the healthcare, starting off with phlebotomy and every sort of building on those skills and taking it all the way up through a bachelor's degree and looking at lots of different pieces of that pathway and connecting all of those credentials directly to the workplace. We're also seeing things like in the vet tech, where one of the institutions is working with the industry certifying group to look at those that aren't in what they're finding is a lot of people that go into vet tech actually want to branch out from there. And so they're looking at the different kinds of related work that goes with that and thinking about credentials that can go with that. So those are just some of the examples. You can see that there's a great array here. And we also have some that are looking at credentials that are in that retro award area, thinking about what are the largest trends of where individuals are gaining knowledge and skills and needing a credential to be able to recognize that, but they have stepped away from a specific degree program and really wanting to be able to capture them. So that I think sums up our area. If you could just go to the next slide, and this is how you can learn more about it. Our website is www.credentialasYouGo.org. And this will be, there is a temporary website that you'll get to if you go there today. I encourage you to go there next week, and it'll be the revised, but that revision is also growing. We're releasing it with the caveat that we're going to continue to grow the website as we go along this pathway. There's some other, we are on social media. I do encourage you to at least sign up for our newsletter, because that is where we will be, putting out all kinds of announcements and advancements, as well as featuring some of the projects that are going on and featuring some of the people that are involved. One thing that we didn't mention is that we have an advisory board of about 130 members that are top leaders at a good cross section of everybody who's touching this credentialing space. And so a lot of the information that we work with, we also are connecting and partnering with our different board members. And with that, I think I'm turning it back to either Bill or going right on to Karen.
Yeah, just quickly, Karen will give us some insight into WordCred's already involved in doing some great things here. As everyone can see, I mean, it's interesting timing, right? Just when our industry, not that it's brand new, has been trying to get our heads around micro-credentials, assessment-based certificates, how to develop, how to use. Well, it's been really fun interacting with Holly and Nan, because the schools are doing the same thing, right? How do we know we need these, and in our language, it's more like a micro-credential or assessment-based certificate, but how do we apply those standards? How do we get the industry recognized organizations involved? And so this is a great bridge for both the CNG community and the ICE community, who first kind of put this in front, and then we have a podcast on that, to really get involved. So, but before we open up, and Mary, we'll get to your great question, but before we do that, Karen, do you want to give us a little overview on how WordCred's involved?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Karen Elsley, the Associate Executive Director, and I just wanted to provide a couple of examples of why WordCred is so excited about the Credentials As You Go initiative, or the movement, as Holly says, and how we're part of that movement and some of the activities we're engaged in to make that change. One of the areas that we're particularly interested in is how do we strengthen the connections between certification bodies and higher education institutions. So we know that many people earn certifications, and we'd like to see clear pathways between those certifications and higher education, and vice versa, that you earn potentially a certificate or maybe even a degree, and how does that relate to a certification? So, what are those pathways? How do we make those pathways more transparent to the consumer so that they can see that by gaining certain skills and certain credentials, it leads to a myriad of other opportunities? We're also very interested in how do you integrate different types of credentials? So we've been doing some work both at four-year institutions and two-year institutions about how you combine different types of credentials. So how is the certification, for example, embedded as part of a degree program, which would allow an individual to pursue additional education and training if they so desire, or if they need to stop out from higher education, they would have that certification with labor market value that they could then take and go into the workforce. And then hopefully, depending on how their life progresses, they would be able to then re-enter the education space and continue their education and the pursuit of their career. And I think the other key issue is really the ability, as Nan was saying, to document learning everywhere. How do we document learning where it occurs and when it's occurring? So one example that we've been exploring is in manufacturing. And we know that in the manufacturing space, a lot of learning actually occurs from the vendors, who then come in and demonstrate and explain to workers how to use a new piece of machinery, which is great. And sometimes that worker then uses the train-the-trainer model to train the rest of his or her team. But is that learning ever captured? And in most cases, the answer is no. So the person has gained knowledge, skills, and experience and has no way to document what they've learned and be able to take that either to their current employer when looking for a promotion or to a new employer to demonstrate what they can do. And we'd really like to see, those gaps shrink so that people can really get the documentation they need to advance in the labor market and to achieve the career goals and aspirations that they have. So Credentials As You Go is a movement that is helping all of these areas and hopefully making it much easier to have a much more equitable labor market in which learning is documented regardless of where it occurs. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you because I know we wanted to have some time for Q&A.
Yep, absolutely. I just want to sum up quickly something Holly already covered, because hopefully you're sold. Everyone's sold, right? Now, how do I get involved? And there's a couple things Holly mentioned for ways to get involved, and we'll post this afterwards. The advisory board, there are 130 on it right now. And if you want to join up, they are looking open, would love more representation from this community for joining that advisory board. So we'll send you some information. We'll post information on how to get involved there. Subscribe to the newsletter. There's a Credential As You Go newsletter, which a lot of information. Next one's next week. The website goes live next week, so you definitely want to check that out. Again, we'll post that. And then something we already have in the works with a few that we've kicked off and are in discussions with is co-authoring a blog with any of the certifying organizations where you want to focus on combining industry with academic and under this initiative. So Holly and Nan would love to be part of a blog. We already have 3 well-known industry organizations that are considering it, and we're going to do that, help get the word out and help get them deeper into this process. So lots of great ways to get involved. Watch for that. We'll post it on the website, on the LinkedIn group. If you're not on the LinkedIn group, please join that. Lots more information coming there. So yes, we have some time. We'll open up to Q&A. Mary, you had a great question. If we were all in person, you just raise your hand and ask it. So Mary, why don't you ask what you put on the chat so we can hear from you? And yeah, let's all look at each other now.
Yeah, thank you. I was just really curious about the statement around current workforce not or having outdated skills, and Holly mentioned the study that she linked, so I'll take a look at that. But what's been interesting that I've been seeing is the fact that some sectors of our industry in the United States are now growing beyond pre-pandemic levels. And for those industries where the jobs are missing, I think there's an opportunity for us as a group of certifiers to help with people to move into new industries. So not really the question I posted, but maybe a follow-up to just hear how can this work help us support the workforce as a whole, especially for those people who are in sectors that are not recovering from the pandemic closures.
So one thing I would add to kind of what Holly was saying is that there's also really where people's skills may no longer match the industry that they're in, but then they're not recognized for the skills that they have. So it looks like they don't have certain skills. So some of the things that these studies look at still are on that idea of, what skills do people have to go into certain industries? But we don't do a good job to really think about how to assess the collection of skills or the set of competencies that somebody has, and then help them reframe that for the different industries. And so as we start to look at the Credential As You Go, and I mentioned that one of the approaches is really to be thinking about skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, but thinking about how that transfer piece fits in there as well, in terms of how can we help people as they look at what they already know and can do, and then what needs to be built on that, and then how does that fit into different ways, and how can they grow along the way, and thinking about how there's also career pathways. So I think we need to really think about that skill dilemma from the point of view of that we're just missing a lot of what people know and can do, and have to find better ways of helping them recognize their own skills and helping fit it into different industries that they might want to go into.
Excellent. Great question, Mary. Thanks, Nan. Sharon, please ask your question. That came up in the breakout room we were in as well. Basically the same question, right? The challenge to use of credentials, specifically the teaching profession, but obviously it's elsewhere. So I know I kind of just asked your question, but please go ahead.
You're on mute, Sharon.
Sorry about that. We've all been reading in the news about how many states are now removing the requirement for any kind of teaching credential license or graduate degree or undergrad, whatever. I mean, here in Florida, for example, they're saying that anybody who's served in the armed forces can be a teacher. There's not going to be any other requirement. And I think this brings up some serious considerations of the whole concept of a credential, whatever that might be, whether it be a license or a certificate or a certification or a degree. We've always, lived with this notion of a credential, whatever it is, as a mark of quality. And I'm wondering if anybody is planning, perhaps one of our speakers is planning to look at the impact of this decision to allow people into the workforce with no credential whatsoever, and how that might affect quality, or how it might reframe the whole concept of our credentials needed at all. What is the value added of a credential?
So Sharon, I would offer that under that umbrella, there's a big area around policy. And although it's true that folks we're going to expand to address teacher shortage, and it's happening in healthcare and a number of other industries as well. Policy is going to still probably, I believe, require criminal background checks if everybody comes forward. There will be other requirements that will go into place. I don't think it's a free-for-all, which is to bring people in, which I think is a good thing. So I think one of the things we're doing is we're trying to study the policy at the federal, at the state level, and there may be industry and employer-specific policies that guide who gets into entry level. We're probably talking about entry level now, and for how long, or do they give people a temporary credential, or and then maybe they function under the guidance of a licensed teacher, as it happens in healthcare, like you function in your first 3 months under a preceptor if you're a new nurse. Even if you have your BSN, they don't just send you to the hospital and say go do it. You really are functioning under something. So we're going to be studying some of the policy changes, and there will be a place, we'll have some playbooks, and there will be a place at our website where we'll be sharing. Particularly, that's very industry sector specific, Sharon. So I think that we'll do whatever we can to collect intel, because this is really happening faster than I think any of us imagined. So we're going to keep our eyes on breaking things into shorter increments. What is that going to mean? Well, how is it going to change licensing? So there is a canary in the mine for sure. But I think and probably more than one canary, actually. So I think we're going to be trying to follow some of those developments. So I really, really appreciate it. And I would say your group, the certification groups, because you're so close to employer needs and recruitment of people you're really at the front line. But you function without the higher ed knowing what you're doing, or other people knowing what you're doing, frankly. And it would really be helpful to have intel from you all. And if there's a way we can develop a better partnership with industry certification organizations, that would be good for all of us in the name of this movement. So I would just say more to come on that, but we may have an ask of you all at some point.
And it's an increasingly important topic, right? It's why ATP was formed way back when, right? The use of an independent third-party standardized assessment in the process, not just education. So it's something we should definitely buy in. And Kate, great follow-up for CNG sometime soon. So a lot more on that. And much as I hate to open up Holly and Nan to a psychometrician, Greg, you had a great question. Do you want to ask it here? I know it's already getting some response in chat. So
thank you, Bill. And I'll leave the psychometrics out of it for now.
That's okay.
It seems to me like there's an important distinction between measuring learning, which is important, and measuring competence, which is not quite the same thing. And employers are very much interested in competence more than they are learning. Now, keep in mind, I say this as someone with 3 college degrees, another extra 100 hours of college credits I couldn't find to apply to anything, and someone who was a teacher for years. I strongly believe in education. But I also know that a lot of what we need people to do in the certification industry, they probably don't need the sort of education that we are giving them from years and years ago. Since I've gotten my PhD, I would guess that only about 1/3 of what I learned in that program is relevant to me today. Everything else that has come along since then, I've had to learn along the way. And Michael, I can't remember his last name, but in our breakout room made a great point that one of the things you learn in college is how to learn more information, and that's an important skill. But for our people that we're certifying, I feel like we're doing them a disservice if all we're saying is you have to have a degree and you answer a couple of questions and you're in the door. I'd much rather see us focus on show me what you can do, and whether you have the degree or not is immaterial. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this.
So I'm going to jump
Right.
in on this just very quickly there, because the degree is a huge data reduction. It represents so much more, and there aren't ways of really seeing that. So the reason I keep saying what people know and can do is that we're not talking about just learning. We really are talking about the competencies and the competency definition of what people know and can do. We drop the word competency in a lot of our language because there's also a debate about what is a competency and what does that mean in different kinds of things. We did some, out of our center here at SUNY Empire State College, we did some research around looking at the competencies that are essential to be successful in the workplace, looking at all the literature, the research, those kinds of things that were going on. And we also looked at what are the competencies that are essential to be successful in higher education, and asked the question, where do they intersect? Because when we're thinking about how do we integrate these two worlds, we needed to see that. And what we found is that those competencies are the same, sometimes different language, sometimes the same language, and that they belonged in these clusters. And so we started to really think about how do those fit together, and how do we start to restructure curricula to be able to think about it from those competency clusters and not be thinking about it just from a field topic. So this is an important point that you're bringing up, Greg, and I would love to have a further conversation with you.
I feel so bad having to cut off this conversation, but we're almost at noon Central Time. Thank you guys so much, panelists. This was a wonderful presentation. It was a really interesting topic. I really am going to look forward to seeing what's going to develop out of this idea of incremental credentialing. So thank you guys so much for presenting on this today. I also just wanted to say really quickly that our next meeting will be in October. We don't have the exact date, but we'll be posting it on the CNG website. It will also send via email. So we'll be sending out registration information. Please also make sure that you do the program evaluation. And if you have anything that you need to put in chat regarding job postings, if you're looking for a position, you know, any of that contact information, please put that in chat. Once again,
or if anybody wants to come off mute now and say job posting, I know that
Yeah.
we had someone mention they are seeking, but if anybody, oh, great. Liz posted about a job at Smith Buckland. Feel free to come off mute and share a little bit about it or about yourself if you're job searching.
Yeah, I'll say something in a second. Hi, so I'm Liz Dombrowski. I'm a credentialing manager at Smith Buckland. We have an open rec I just posted in chat. If anybody has questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk.
Excellent. Thank you. So I just once again thank our speakers and our sponsors. This was a great session, and we will make the session recording and slides available later if you have any questions. Also, let us know if you have suggestions for future sessions. Thanks, Bill. But have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.